Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive, this time into the world of geoeconomics.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, it's gonna be a fascinating one.
I think so.
I've been reading this book called War by Other Means
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that one.
by Robert Blackwill and Jennifer Harris,
Yeah.
and it's all about how countries are using their economic power to kind of shape the global landscape.
It's fascinating how much leverage nations have using economics
It is.
these days.
Yeah, and they dive into it with all sorts of different tools like, trade deals and sanctions and investments and even currency manipulation.
I think a lot of people don't realize how much goes on behind the scenes
Yeah.
with these tools.
It's like almost like a game of chess,
Yeah.
where they're moving these pieces around to try to
High
achieve their
stakes,
goals.
but it's like a high-stakes game.
Yeah, and for somebody who maybe isn't, super deep into the world of international relations and economics, why should they care about this?
Well, I think for the average person, it's important to understand how these geoeconomic moves can impact their everyday lives.
Okay, so how does it like trickle down to like the main street?
For example, um, these moves can make or break entire economies.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Think about the sanctions that have been imposed on Iran.
Right.
Those sanctions have been in place for years, and they've had a massive impact.
Yep. So what has happened there?
Well, their oil exports have plummeted
Wow.
by like 80%.
Wow. So that's like a huge chunk of their.
Exactly. And it's forced them to seek alternative markets, often at a much higher cost.
Wow. So there are very real world consequences.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an example of using geoeconomics in a more defensive or like a response to a
Yeah.
situation. But what about when a nation is like proactively using it to further their agenda?
Well, a prime example of that is China's Belt and Road Initiative.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about that.
It's this massive infrastructure project that spans across continents.
Like roads and bridges and
Yeah. Roads, bridges, ports, railways,
wow.
you name it.
That sounds like it would be incredibly expensive.
It is. It's a huge investment, but China sees it as a strategic move.
Okay, so it's not just about, improving infrastructure.
Not at all.
What else is?
It's about projecting their economic and political influence.
I see.
So by investing in these countries, China is securing access to valuable resources,
Okay.
opening up new markets for its goods, and strengthening its geopolitical position on the world stage.
Wow. So they're kind of playing the long game here.
Exactly.
Right, they're thinking decades ahead.
Yeah, they're thinking about the future.
It sounds like a very powerful way to gain influence and leverage in the global landscape.
Oh, it is.
So how does something like the Belt and Road Initiative affect like global supply chains?
Well, the Belt and Road Initiative, it touches a huge number of countries.
How many are we talking about?
We're talking about 68 countries,
Wow.
about 65% of the world's population, around 40% of global GDP.
That's a huge chunk of.
It is a significant portion of the world.
So for companies that are like sourcing from these regions or, doing business in these areas, that's.
It's a game changer.
Yeah.
It means new opportunities,
Sure.
but it also presents new complexities to navigate.
Yeah. So can you give us like a specific example of the types of projects that are involved and how they might affect, somebody in procurement or supply chain management?
Sure. So one example is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC for short.
I see.
This is a flagship project within the Belt and Road Initiative,
Okay.
and it involves building transportation networks,
Okay.
energy projects, and special economic zones across Pakistan.
So for companies in the energy or logistics, this sounds like it would be.
Huge.
Yeah.
It creates opportunities to be involved in large-scale projects,
Oh, yeah.
but it also means that you need to understand the specific regulations and requirements for doing business in Pakistan and with Chinese companies.
So a deeper understanding of the geopolitical landscape is becoming kind of crucial for businesses operating in this space.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just focus on costs and logistics anymore.
Yeah.
You have to factor in the political and economic relationships between countries.
So like risk management is becoming much more
Oh, yeah.
complex.
Much more complex. You have to understand the potential risks
Right.
and adapt your strategies accordingly.
So we've talked about Iran and China, but what are some other tools in the geoeconomic toolbox that countries are using?
Well, there are definitely other tools, and they can be more subtle.
Oh,
For example, countries can manipulate their currency
okay.
to make their exports cheaper.
Oh, I see.
and gain a competitive advantage.
So they can kind of like game the system a little
A
bit?
little bit, yeah.
Interesting.
They can also impose tariffs or quotas on imports.
Right, which makes those foreign goods more expensive.
Exactly.
It sounds like the global marketplace is becoming like more complex than ever
Oh, it definitely is.
before.
Yeah.
And for businesses, understanding these geoeconomic dynamics is increasingly important,
It's essential for success in today's world.
especially for like multinational corporations that are operating on a global scale.
Absolutely. Those companies are often caught in the crossfire
Oh, yeah.
of geoeconomic maneuvers.
They probably have teams of people just trying to like figure this all out.
Exactly. They have to weigh profits against ethical considerations, potential blowback from consumers or governments, and the complexities of navigating different regulatory environments.
Wow, it sounds like a lot to juggle.
It is.
So can you give us an example of what that might look like for a multinational company? Like how do they get caught in this crossfire?
Sure, imagine a clothing company that sources cotton from a particular region where there are concerns about human rights.
Okay.
While the company may get lower costs, they risk being associated with those human rights issues.
Oh, so that could damage their reputation.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And consumers today are much more aware of these things,
Yeah.
and they might choose to boycott the brand.
Yeah, so it's not just about the bottom line anymore. Companies also have to consider their reputation and the potential impact on their brand.
It's exactly.
It highlights the importance of due diligence, supply chain transparency, and building ethical sourcing practices into your business model.
So it's a balancing act
Yeah.
between economic considerations and ethical considerations.
Yeah, finding that balance is crucial.
Yeah, and it sounds like geoeconomics is really adding this extra layer of complexity
It definitely is.
to that whole equation.
It's a whole new dimension to consider.
It is.
Yeah,
Yeah, it really highlights the complexity of operating in like a globalized world.
right.
It's not just about finding the cheapest supplier anymore.
It's not. It's about thinking more strategically. Geoeconomics forces us to do that.
So what does that look like in practice?
Well, take the concept of reshoring, for example.
Reshoring, okay, I've heard that term, but I'm not entirely sure I understand what it means.
Sure. So reshoring is when a company brings production back to its home country.
Okay.
So let's say a company in the United States had moved its manufacturing to China to take advantage of lower labor costs.
But then maybe due to rising geopolitical tensions or disruptions caused by events like the pandemic,
Okay.
they decide to move their production back to the U.S.
So they're bringing those jobs and that manufacturing capacity back home.
Exactly, that's reshoring.
Interesting. Are there other strategies that companies are using to manage these risks?
Yeah, there's also nearshoring.
Nearshoring.
This involves moving production closer to the target market.
Okay.
So instead of manufacturing in China for the U.S. market, a company might move production to Mexico or another country in closer proximity.
That makes sense. It kind of helps shorten those supply chains and reduces some of the geopolitical risks.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between cost efficiency and risk management.
So we've talked about a lot of challenges, but are there any like potential upsides to this whole geoeconomics situation?
Oh, there are definitely opportunities.
Okay.
Understanding geoeconomics can help businesses identify new markets, secure valuable resources, and gain a competitive advantage.
So it's not all doom and gloom.
Not at all. It's about being proactive and strategic.
Can you give us a specific example of how a business could benefit?
Sure, imagine a company that produces electric vehicles.
Okay.
As countries around the world transition to cleaner energy,
Right.
this company can use its understanding of geoeconomics to identify the most promising markets.
Okay.
They can anticipate shifts in government policies, maybe even secure favorable trade agreements or subsidies.
By setting up manufacturing in specific countries.
Exactly.
So they're kind of like leveraging these geoeconomic trends to their advantage.
Exactly. They're turning a potential threat into a strategic opportunity.
I like that.
And this kind of thinking can apply across various industries, from technology and agriculture to manufacturing and energy.
Okay, so let's get down to brass tacks here.
Yeah.
How can our listener in procurement, supply chain management, or marketing practically apply these ideas? Like, what are some actionable steps they can take?
Okay, well, let's start with procurement. A deeper understanding of geoeconomics can lead to more resilient supply chains.
Okay.
It means considering not only the cost of goods, but also the political stability and economic conditions of the countries you're sourcing from.
So not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. It's about diversifying your suppliers,
Right.
having a plan B, maybe even a plan C.
So if one region experiences political instability or a natural disaster,
You can shift your sourcing to another region without disrupting your entire business.
Okay, that makes sense. What about for those in supply chain management? What are some things they should be thinking about?
For them, it's about anticipating disruptions.
Okay,
Can your logistics handle a sudden shift in trade routes?
that's a good question.
Do you have alternative transportation options in place?
Right.
What if a key port is shut down due to political unrest?
You have to be prepared for anything.
Exactly. Thinking through these scenarios can help you avoid costly delays and maintain business continuity.
So it's all about having those backup plans and being prepared for the unexpected.
It is.
And how does this all apply to someone in marketing?
Well, in marketing, it's about understanding the geopolitical context in which you're operating.
Okay.
The same ad campaign may not resonate in different parts of the world.
Right. Different cultures, different values.
Exactly. For example, a message that works well in a free market economy might fall flat in a country with strong government control over the media.
So you have to kind of adapt your message to the local cultural and political climate.
You need to be aware of sensitivities and nuances. You also need to consider the potential impact of economic sanctions or trade wars.
Right, because if your company is doing business in a country that's under sanctions, you might need to adjust your marketing strategy accordingly.
Exactly. It's about being aware of the bigger picture.
This is really making me rethink how interconnected everything is.
It is.
Like a decision made in one part of the world can have ripple effects across the globe.
That's the reality of geoeconomics.
Yeah,
We live in an increasingly complex and interconnected world.
it is.
And understanding these dynamics is becoming essential for anyone involved in international business.
It's not just something for the politicians and the economists to worry about anymore.
It's everyone's business.
It is. So as we kind of wrap up this part of our deep dive, what's the one key takeaway we want our listener to leave with?
I think the key takeaway is that in today's world, business and geopolitics are inseparable.
They're intertwined.
They are. Regardless of your role, you need to be aware of the forces shaping the global landscape and understand their impact on your work.
So it's about looking beyond our immediate tasks and kind of seeing the bigger picture.
It is. It's not just about economics anymore. It's about understanding the interplay of economics, politics, and global power dynamics.
It sounds like we all need to become geoeconomics savvy.
I think that's a good goal.
So where can our listener go to learn more?
Well, for a deeper dive, I highly recommend the book we've been discussing, War by Other Means.
By Blackwill and Harris.
Yes. But even staying informed about current events, reading reputable news sources, and following industry publications can give you a good foundation.
So it's about staying curious and keeping your finger on the pulse of what's happening in the world.
Exactly. And remember, you don't need to become a geopolitical expert overnight.
Right.
Start by paying attention, asking questions, and connecting the dots between global events and your work.
That's great advice. It's about looking beyond our immediate tasks and seeing the bigger picture.
Absolutely. The world is a complex and fascinating place.
It is.
The more we understand about it, the better equipped we'll be to navigate its challenges and seize its opportunities.
This has been an incredibly enlightening conversation. We've covered a lot of ground, from sanctions and trade wars to supply chains and marketing strategies.
We have.
It's clear that geoeconomics is a powerful force shaping the world around us.
Yeah, it feels like geoeconomics is this underlying current that's influencing everything, even if we're not always aware of it.
Yeah, like the tide, constantly shaping the landscape of global business. As we wrap up our deep dive today, is there a final thought-provoking question that you would like to leave our listener with something to ponder as they navigate this complex world of geoeconomics?
Let me see. How about this? As countries use economics increasingly as a tool of statecraft, will businesses find themselves caught in the middle, forced to choose sides?
That's a really interesting question to think about the role of corporations on the global stage.
Yeah, and it raises questions about unintended consequences.
Right.
When governments use economic measures to achieve their goals, how does that impact ordinary citizens in those countries?
Right. Are there
The casualties.
casualties? How do we balance national interests with the well-being of people around the world?
These are big questions with no easy answers.
Exactly. And that's why these conversations are important, to understand the complexities of geoeconomics and to think critically about the choices we make as individuals, as businesses, and as a global community.
This has been a truly fascinating deep dive. I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about.
I hope. We've explored the tools of geoeconomics from sanctions and trade agreements to strategic investments and currency manipulation. And we've seen how these tools are being used to shape global power dynamics. And we've discussed the implications for businesses operating in this complex landscape.
It's a lot to take in, but I think it's important to be aware of these things.
Absolutely. And I think you've done a great job of kind of breaking it down and making it understandable.
Well, thank you.
So for our listener out there, remember, knowledge is power.
It is.
The more we understand about the forces shaping our world, the better equipped we'll be to make informed decisions and shape a future that benefits us all.
Well said. I couldn't agree more.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of geoeconomics.
It's been a pleasure.
We encourage you to continue exploring, stay curious, and keep asking questions until next time.